Hey there, good morning. How y'all doing? Bless all your hearts. Um, I turned on my phone this morning and I was greeted by AlXColyur, and I love AlXColyur. Um, I've shared this ever since I was a little child. When you're on fire to learn and you want to experience everything that is possible to experience because you're on fire to learn, and I've always thought of the universe of creation or all creation as everything that is out there that you're giving love to is like your friend or a pal. Somebody else you haven't met you can learn from. Whoa, what are you doing? Now you're learning something new through somebody else is out there. So the way that I always perceived what everything else was is sort of the same way that I perceive who I am in the same mirror, which is what love is. And that is an evolutionary thing. But what I was going to address, which is why I stopped the video with Alex, is in the very beginning, it was like you're in an echo chamber, because by their calendar, I'm 71 years of age, but I remember when I was somewhere between my childhood and my early adolescence, because you hear the language, so you translate what the language means because it's a Navy term, which was all hands on deck, which is to say, if the ship is under attack, which is like a starship, a solar system, a galaxy, it means all hands on deck. That means everybody in the galaxy that considers the galaxy their home realizes they have a threat level analysis that essentially threatens to extinguish life as they once knew it. It was in a state of peace, a state of harmony. And if you will, for me, as the law of one, you know that love doesn't work backwards in time. So when you are what love is, you represent the highest superconductor. You represent what the law is, which is what love is. So that's as simple as it gets. So when you're experiencing everything that isn't what love is, because you can certainly measure that on a planet chip, you realize that's a threat level assessment. Okay, so it goes back to Reno, Nevada, when I experienced the light significantly rising in the entire galaxy, because the light is informing me of that. So I know that because I experienced that. That's how it works when you run a big-ass pipeline through your heart, which is your vortex, which is your accelerator. So he mentioned something else this morning that I watched when he talked about how Andromedans, he said when one of his mentors talked about he had reached a place where he was finally able to transition. And it's funny, the words that we use to describe what we mean by this, he used the word the next experience. So I realized, for example, this is like echoing my own childhood. You realize that we're experiencers. We're learning from our experiences. So now we're back to, I want to experience everything that is possible to experience from which I learn from. So you keep moving. Okay, so what it really boils down to, and he echoed that after that, is that we choose our pathway. That's your free will. Because you keep learning as you keep going, and you keep going up. It's like climbing a ladder. Okay, because you want to reach new heights. So you're experiencing more and more of the light that represents what love is, to experience more and more of what's in that light, which is the universe of consciousness or other experiences that you can have by how vast and how infinite the universe really is when you realize that love energy can recreate itself over and over again into all the different experiences that are possible to experience. You already know when you are what love is. That's infinite. That means you're never going to be able to experience everything that's possible to experience. So the idea that you can experience everything there is possible to experience is never ending. So you know that it starts with what love is and it goes on forever. So I've known that since childhood. So what that means is you are a self-directed learner. Okay? Your spirit is leading you along. So your spirit becomes the guide and the teacher. That's self-directed learning, and that's called experiential learning. You're learning through the experience because the teacher is the mirror. That's the experience because you're experiencing the result. If it's a bad result, then you don't want to do that no more, right? So now it's eliminated out of your RAM. So now you begin to realize where the learning curve space, vectors, right, is the acceleration of your learning. The faster you're learning, right, to get rid of those things that do not serve you, so you're always experiencing love wherever you go, you're burning that all off. You're burning it out of your RAM. Now, for me, as a polarity integrator, you can realize how much has to be burned off when a monopole means that you're in balance with the magnets on a planet, right, between two poles. So now you're measuring the difference in resistance between everybody that isn't. You see how that works? Yeah, so those are enormous transmutation jobs for polarity integrators. Okay, because you're like a sponge. Your antennas are hypersensitive. I used to have a little bit of a different word that I described, which is like when you think of extra, what was it? When I was a child, I learned this word. It was called ESP, extra sensory perception. Now we're back to vibration perception. The vibration that you're using, which is your core frequency identity, to experience who you are. And then that becomes your antenna, like 528, which is 15D. Now you're experiencing. Your antenna is extremely sensitive. So you're a multidimensional learner. Okay, you're like plugged into the whole shebang. I call it the whole shebang. Shebang. Like the grower, remember the seed in the grower? So you're wanting to maintain your balance. Your water world is in balance because that's what you are. You're in balance in spirit with your soul. Your energy field is in balance. So whenever you're experiencing imbalance or you're experiencing something that's less than what love is, your antenna is what's picking that up, your DNA. So the imprint of who you are, which is your operating system, you're operating in a field with other operating systems. So you're measuring what's happening on a planetary scale based on the resistance. So their resistance, so think of it this way, if it's possible, think of it this way. This is how it works because this is how I measure it, right? And that is the more we experience more love and light in our heart, which means an increase in the capacitor. The capacitor is rising in its ability to spin more light, to experience more love, and clear the goo codes that are meant to lower the state of consciousness. So you're not expanding your consciousness to experience more love in your heart, which is more of what the universe is, as it was the energy upon which it was created with, that goes on forever. So on the other hand, they're going in the other direction, which means they're increasing the magnetic compression because they're in such enormous resistance, because they are in so much fear of what love is, that they're going to extreme measures to not experience it. That's the dilemma. So now we're back at the center point of the dilemma, which is control. They don't know how to allow a free spirit to be free to be what it is, which is what love is, because it realizes once a spirit is in that light, which is what love is, that spirit's free, that energy is free. Love is what frees us. That's what frees the spirit that is in the light. That's the teacher. Okay? So you realize when they're going in the other direction, spinning in the other direction, they keep losing light. So they want to keep losing light because they don't want to experience what the light is, because the light will expose their crimes. All of them. That's why I've said whenever since I was a child, you know, it's just like there's two people that live in this house, okay, that use crack. So everybody knows what that does, right? So when my energy comes in, they're not comfortable with that. When the gentleman who was the property owner here, him and I were having fast conversations. He took us all out for dinner one night. And him and I, as soon as I met him, I properly introduced myself. Right? That's being fearless. Not fearless. But what it really is you're living in the truth. So you're sort of map reading because you get done with trying to hide. It's not really hiding. You're managing the terrain because you're map reading their DNA. At what level do they operate at? Which means if I told you this kind of stuff, is this somebody, for example, that's making an intersection with you that's an AI drone? Because it might be. It's sort of like when I knew as a child, what we know when we know it. Because if they know what we know, because then they become aware of what we are, and they're on the other side, then it means now we're the bad guys when actually we're the good guys. We're like the special forces that land behind enemy-held lines and anchor and ground our antenna into the planet, right? So it works like that because of the jobs that we do, right? So everybody's got sort of a mission status when you're in a spiritual battlefield, right? Between essentially good and evil. You know, the things they do and the things that we do with our energy. They don't do what we do with our energy. We give love to everything, all creation. That's the grower. Okay, so they're in fear of that energy. So the only way that they can control us is to get us to be in a state of fear when it's them who are in fear of us. And that's the reversal stuff. That's to flip the consciousness so that now you're in a state of fear. And so that fractures. Fracture. So you realize that as it keeps fracturing, what happens? Increases the magnetic compression because you keep losing a part of what you are that you began with, which is your soul. So they're soul harvesters. Okay, and you lose the spirit. And the spirit that is in the light is the teacher. Okay, so what that basically means is they're hijacking and destroying classrooms. Real classrooms. Okay, so what do you do with something like that? You have to eliminate them because they're destroying our classrooms. Okay, otherwise the universe doesn't move on, does it? It's not going to evolve and accelerate at a very high rate of speed in which you're living in a universe that is in love with itself, which means we're all the law of one. That's the problem. That's the dilemma. So like anything else, you have to account for the responsibility of what you do with your energy in the relationships that you have with all the other seeded races. Right? So now we're back to teachers. Now we're back to self-directed learning. Okay, which really is a measurement of your learning at whatever point in time when you're experiencing who you are, where you've arrived at that point in time as a result of everything that you've experienced from which we all learned. Right? So I used to put up over the course of the years how to have a thriving relationship with other people. Right? How to collaborate with other beings so that your world is thriving, your star system is thriving, your galaxy is thriving, your universe is thriving. That's a no-brainer. Right? So this is, as I've always said, ever since I started putting videos up, you got a measurement, you got a ruler in your back pocket, and it's one law, and that makes it simple because you are what the law is. So now I was thinking about when I woke up, you know, the number, the astronomical number of crimes that you become aware of that you thus experience because you can map it and thus experience it because you're aware of it. That number, that number was so big so long ago, I just forgot counting. That's a threat level analysis, right? Because you realize what you're connected to, right? So that's why I call them the heavy hitters have to come in, which is what Alex said, and I knew as a child, where it was all hands on deck. So all hands on deck is here, and I know that. Particularly, there's a lot of different ways that I translate it, but if you translate it through as a creative artist on how beautiful this planet is, you have no idea how many tears I've cried because of what happened to it, what happened here. Because it's paradise. This island, for example, is paradise. Paradise lives in our heart because we have a relationship which is a mirror with what we're being shown, what's possible to experience. So when you look at the artistic canvas of everywhere that I've gone, you just fall in love with it. So you're in love with the goddess that's in the planet, which is the great living spirit of Gaia. Right? You realize how beautiful it is, the worlds we create, we can experience. That's why they mimic what we create, because they don't have the ability to do that. They're not experiencing love in creation, the love that it was created with. Right? That's creation energy. That's not a copycat. That's the real stuff. So anyway, I wanted to share that this morning. Thank you very much, Alex. Love you, brother. It's amazing how it just flows right out of him, doesn't it? Just in a very natural way. That's the way the energy works. That's why it's so beautiful to feel.